What makes Komodo's approach different from platforms like Polkadot or Cosmos or Avalanche?
There were a lot of other projects doing similar things, and one thing that we figured is that pretty much every project was trying to reinvent the wheel or working on something, right, without taking the rest of the crypto space into account. So you had a lot of different interfaces. They weren't compatible with each other. That was really where we started putting a hardcore focus on Komodo's core vision, which always was blockchain interoperability.
What evidence shows that this actually works in practice?
You can't trust third parties. Your best devs, you need to do this yourself. We know, we read the code, we know there is no, malicious bits inside. And whenever there's an update at one of these libraries, we check the difference and we read that code as well. Whatever was changed or added, we read it.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lorena Nessi for CCN. And today I'm joined by Kadan Stadelmann, Chief Technology Officer at Komodo. We'll be discussing Komodo's vision, technology, and future direction. With Binance removing Komodo's token, KMD, on July 4, 2025, key issues like decentralization, liquidity without centralized exchanges, compliance, and user experience are now front and center. Today, we'll explore how Komodo plans to turn this challenge into an opportunity and whether its technology and token model can thrive in a world moving beyond centralized exchanges. Thank you, Kadan, for being with us at CCN.
Hey, hi Lorena, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Nice to see you. We're going to go into the background, the origins and vision of Komodo. So Komodo began as a fork for Zcash. How has the project vision evolved since those early days? And what makes Komodo's approach different from platforms like Polkadot or Cosmos or Avalanche?
All right, so yeah, great question. So initially in 2015, 16, around the time when we basically launched Komodo, there were a lot of other projects doing similar things. And one thing that we figured is that pretty much every project was in kind of terms trying to reinvent the wheel or working on something, right, without taking the rest of the crypto space into account. So you had a lot of different interfaces. They weren't compatible with each other. And so we ended up the community with hundreds. At some point it was thousands of tokens and coins that were kind of isolated from each other. And in a certain sense, the communities were also isolated from each other. And we figured, we'll need to find a way to efficiently and effectively bridge these different communities and crypto sets. So both in technical terms, but then also in, non-technical terms, in, from a social aspect, and also taking the potential socioeconomic impact into account. So that was really where we started putting a hardcore focus on Komodo's core vision, which always was blockchain interoperability, right? Even though we were based on Zcash and had privacy tag was one of our main pillars. At some point that evolved, right? Exchanges such as Binance, etc., kind of forced us to remove privacy tag to, kind of take a distance from the core original OG crypto ethos, where it was all around privacy, non-custodial tech stacks. A centralized exchange, honestly, right, if you look at it from a purely technological perspective, it totally defeats the purpose of, cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, which always, meant we need to put the power and control over crypto into the end user's hand. And, that's really where we come from. And that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years. Komodo's been around for more than a decade. It's basically based on Zcash, but it's a SuperNet spin-off. a project which was working on decentralized exchange technologies back in 2013-14. That's also where Komodo is being referenced to as one of the inventors of cross-chain atomic trading and cross-chain atomic swaps. That's like really our like key focus, like, like this DEX technology stack from a very low level perspective.
Okay, great. And when you talk about these centralized exchanges and maybe is something you want to move on, after Komodo's delisting, what concrete numbers can you actually share, such as daily active users or monthly active users or your daily swap volume or order book depth? What
Absolutely.
can you actually show about Komodo wallet and its liquidity? Are you
Okay.
pursuing relistings?
So yeah, I'll go into all of them. So first of all, like up to very recently, Komodo, and still when you like enter like the Komodo DEX, there's still like a beta warning in place, which is being removed like as we speak. So like within like the next 2 weeks, there's a major release taking place, which will also roll out the so-called trading protocol upgrade. This is an enhancement from both a security perspective, but also from, like basically an protocol efficiency perspective. And before the Binance delisting, the volumes within the Komodo DEX, because it was in active development, it wasn't really within like a publicly presented production, like a runtime environment. It was really where we're still like fully developing it. And we had, I think, like on Binance alone, like, average, like, sometimes 1 million, sometimes 3 million in daily volumes on KMD, the token. On the DEX, it was virtually zero, right? Now we see like with a very limited, basically test user base, we see like 5 figures on daily basis. Within the user numbers, we're like at 10,000 monthly active users right now. And that's basically the Komodo wallet, which has like the DEX integrated, right? Like, so our key end user product is the Komodo wallet. And that it's a non-custodial peer-to-peer based wallet which supports pretty much all coins and tokens in existence, a variety of different protocols. Ironically, even like Binance Smart Chain and all its like tokens and assets. And yeah, within this like wallet, you have like the Komodo DEX, and that's what we're basically now referring to. And that's like the numbers that I'm like presenting right now. We haven't initiated a growth campaign, which the team is kickstarting with a cross community trading competition. So that basically leaderboard based trading competition between 2 different like communities. I mean, the communities are already known. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to spoil it, but I'll just like do it. As it's gonna be like Digibyte is one of the communities. It's an OG community, like very very old school. Like we know a lot of like their community representatives and like people that are like super active within the Digibyte community, and they've been around like for 10 years. I mean, the project is even older. That was like the first wave of altcoins, right? And yeah, without going too much like off topic, that's kind of like the rough like look on the DEX, like current like user numbers and efforts in regards like to growth that we're looking at right now. And also one thing that is definitely worth mentioning is with the delisting of KMD from Binance, we had like professional market makers operating on that exchange, right? So we're basically routing that liquidity into Komodo DEX. So we now have third-party external market makers and liquidity providers working with us on the DEX. So when you basically open up the DEX, that's like one of the things people see now, that there's like active liquidity being put in. And that's something that we're gonna like scale up further.
Does this mean that you're actually trying to go fully independent from centralized exchanges?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think for the long term, it's a benefit, like for KMD, for the token, for the network, and I mean, for the crypto ethos to be not listed on any like centralized exchanges. What you need is fiat on off ramps. That's something that we have in place, right? But if you manage to get sufficient liquidity really, with like with a solid spread and like coverage of the key pairs specifically for your assets. I'm speaking about KMD now, for example, right? Because this, any asset, any coin could do that. If you get on a DEX and if you like cover these key factors, you are independent. You don't rely on any like centralized exchange. Just ensure there's routes and paths for your community to on and off ramp like fiat. But nowadays we have USDT, USDC. That's an equivalent like to fiat. You know what I mean, right? Like where I'm going. So we really moved to a point where I believe, like centralized services and exchanges specifically as we know them now, they're obsoleted. Like we need Web3 and decentralized authentication systems on top of all these exchanges, and people need to be the custodians of their own funds. I think that's where we should be moving to as a crypto community. And I think the DEX, vision and technology is just like perfect, perfect use case and basis for this.
So you're talking about really going back to this ethos that you referred at the beginning, right? The ethos of blockchain. And this means that we are talking about privacy or this pseudo anonymity. But actually, we know that Komodo's DEX does not require know your customer, which protects users' privacy and can raise concerns also about misuse, right? So what's Komodo's philosophy on this balance? Is there a philosophy of balance at all between privacy and regulation? And how do you see the role of decentralized platforms in preventing illicit activity without replicating the surveillance of traditional finance, which I think it's important to address if we want to make the argument stronger in the face of these other ways of approaching blockchain?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So first of all, I think we absolutely need to, build the technology stacks to be able to comply with regulations, right? No question. There's a lot of like bad things that can be done, but with any type of, valuable asset, this could be commodities, this can be cash, this can be literally gold bars. It doesn't matter if it's like crypto or something else. Second of all, I think you could definitely build a great balance between like privacy and compliance. You can, for example, now specifically talking about Komodo and our DEX. So one thing is there's like sanctions lists, publicly known addresses and keys that are believed to be related to illicit activities, like to terrorism, to a lot of very critical, layers. And you don't want to expose your user base to dirty funds, right? Or to anything like of risk. So my voice, my thought, and I believe the wider industry really agrees to this, is that we need to implement these tools, but these tools to a certain degree also need to be made available by regulations, by authorities. They need to set up DBs and API endpoints that would enhance and simplify us complying, because right now it's like, okay, no, you have to comply. That's a bunch of laws if you violate this or that, but the tools are not around. So you yourself as a service provider within like crypto, like you have like to do a lot. You have a lot of like overhead to get there. So I believe some type of standardization is needed in the space within regulations. But to answer your question, right, I think yes, a balance can be built between privacy, and basically compliance, legal compliance, because with Komodo, for example, we have a pub key system, and each actor within participant within the DEX network is known by his public address. So you can have like a list with those addresses that are not allowed, to participate within this network, that you don't want your users to deal with. And these are very simple, implementations. Any like crypto projects could adopt them, and I'm sure within the next years we'll see a lot happening. Within regulation specifically, we'll see some type of KYC, maybe even like zero knowledge KYC, where your data is kind of somewhere and someone could access this in case there's courts or multiple parties demanding it or whatever. Just thinking out loud, but I'm sure we'll get there, and it's important, and we comply, right? We have geofencing for sanctioned jurisdictions. Our team is even like working on items that aren't really required right now, but we predict that, sooner than later, governments and various jurisdictions will target DeFi and taxes, and they will, also impose sanctions, on the service providers if you don't comply. So we're full with compliance, but still trying to preserve as much as, privacy protection as possible.
And as of now, do you actually share any public data or transparency reports to reassure users and regulators that the platform is actually being used in a responsible way according to the actual present guidelines?
Okay. So what's great with us is that we do not collect data. I think that's one like big benefit. That's also like what our like privacy policies like state. What we do is that we have an anonymized and non-basically identity or non-pub key, because there is no identity in the wallet anyway, but no pub key related information, but you'd opt in for that, right? Like, and that's a window basically that opens up and asks, if you're like happy to share usage like information. That's for the active like development. But we believe you don't have to, track users. You can get all the data you want on chain. You just look at the blockchain, and that's the beauty of the public ledger, that all the action within your DEX is something you can read out the blockchain ledger. You don't have like to, have any kind of like, to me, that's all like spy software, right? Like all this tools and software, they track everything. If you look at other wallets, they track your ID, your KYC, they track your behavior, your spending behavior, your assets, your net value, like everything. And that data, if it gets into the wrong hands, we believe it can do a lot of harm. So our philosophy here is just don't even collect the data. You'll never be target, to a hacker. Your users never would have to fear that someone's going to be able to check, what's their portfolio value, and then maybe, bribe an engineer with Amazon cloud services or with Google, who's gonna then dig out the IPs from these people. I mean, you could, if someone's very sophisticated, and we're talking about like billions of dollars of net worth within crypto, which isn't uncommon, people would do a lot. Like, people killed for much less, and we believe this needs to be protected, by all means.
It's interesting, right? It's challenging, I think, in terms of
It is,
regulation,
absolutely.
because, at some point, you were mentioning, at some point, this data will be accessible somehow, probably because governments, regulations will force the access to do so. In the meantime, you can protect the privacy of the users, but eventually the data will be there, hopefully in the right hands. But, it's like a
Yeah,
mouse and cat game, isn't it? What's going to be first, and
always.
how are you going to implement that?
Absolutely.
Well, going into some more technical issues, Komodo now supports inter-blockchain communication, IBC routing, as you mentioned it before. What risks do you see with IBC, like client expiry or relayer issues or misconfigured channels? And how do actually atomic swaps fit into that model? And if you have had any external audits to test security?
So first of all, the reason we've targeted like the Cosmos ecosystem as such, and implemented our own IBC, interbridge into like the Komodo DEX, was the community aspect. We were always active community members within the Cosmos, ecosystem and Cosmoverse. We participated in multiple Cosmoverse events, and we know osmosis, right? We also we never really didn't we never wanted like to compete with osmosis, for example, because we see there's a DEX ecosystem and DeFi ecosystem within like the Cosmos universe. What we missed was this native, interoperability stacked from IBC and Cosmos into, for example, OG old school UTXO protocols such as Bitcoin. You didn't have the possibility or to swap or bridge Cosmos or Cosmos based tokens or other like Tendermint assets into, say, Ethereum native, no rep tokens, no nothing. That was like key motivation, really, like to implement it. How we function is, I mean, we use the the script-based, also OG and old school HTLC tech stack. So, I mean, in simple terms, right? Like, I mean, hash time locks is like the basis of how our atomic swap protocol was designed. The very, very first version actually was based on Tier Nolan's outline, basically the godfather of atomic swaps, who basically, talked about using Bitcoin script, which in my eyes is like the most simple smart contracting language out there, even though it's not, right? Like, but within the Bitcoin stack, where you could actually already get some type of business logic implemented on chain, right? And I mean, obviously, with protocols such as Cosmos and EVM, etc., you have way more, like possibilities in implementing like various things. So we were able to, implement the same type of atomic swap logic on the Cosmos, on the IBC side, and that was already validated multiple times. So we also had external security validation done a couple of years ago on this like protocol. Good thing is, it's an old school cross-chain atomic swap based on an order book network and not an AMM style DEX, right? So this means there is no counterparty risk or rug pull risk in our sense, because at no point of time, not even as part of, say AMM liquidity pool or delegated liquidity pool, validator or so, nothing. There is no point of failure because it's just going to be me and you. So security wise, like the worst that can happen is someone like steps back from an ongoing trade or swap and wastes your time because there's timeouts that will then refund your funds on chain. This is all on chain, right? Like, so someone could waste your time. But this upcoming trading protocol upgrade I referred to in the beginning of our call is something that will prevent that, right? Like, so the system is being like enhanced to even remove the risk of having wasted time, on potential swaps, arbitrage deals. This can be DOS attacks, right? I mean, if someone wanted to mess with, I'd say, half of the DEXs out right now, you could very simply, right? You could just spoof fake orders, cheap orders, immediately pull liquidity, put it back in, etc. And you keep rotating pub keys. You can DDoS half the network. I believe the reason it's not happening is no one really is targeting these, tax for attacks that don't make you any money. But if someone wanted to disrupt most of these AMMs, etc., they could right now, right? These are things that are not possible with like the KMD tech in the generation, the version it's like entering right now.
Okay, we are getting very technical terms, right? If we
Okay,
could,
yes.
if we could say in simple terms, what shows the evidence for this? The evidence of the security. What could you mention? What evidence shows that this actually works in practice with this specific approach that avoids AMMs, and also if you have had any external audits to actually test the security?
So, I mean, again, if you look at like the variety of like potential attacks and specifically sophisticated attacks and how they could be chained, I believe like the list is like really endless. I think the biggest proof to our or to any protocol's, safety level and security level is the number of infiltrations or like the damage that was done like to users. And with Komodo, that number is like 0. You know what I mean? Like, and the DEX, it's first of all, it's open source, so anyone can like validate and look into like the code. Our DEX repository is one like of the most active dev repositories on GitHub across like the crypto space on various like rankings. So if you Google that, Dr. Google will always like give you all these responses. And we have that up like for multiple years. So the Komodo wallet itself, this is up like for 5 years around, like it's been like up in wildfire. There was one day where there was a potential issue on a potential upstream attack. So that means, someone puts malicious code into some library or some software that then you reuse and, your users get infiltrated, or wallets get emptied, etc. And in that situation, like if you Google startup hacked itself Komodo, like this sentence on Google, you'll have the articles. There's a few articles. ZDNet and a few others like posted, the story, what happened to us. We checked that, we figured it, we were faster than the infiltrator on the upstream attack, and we wiped all the wallets, and we sent all the funds back to the users. And that was like over $10 million. I don't really reckon like $12 million, $50 million, something like that worth of like crypto assets that we returned to users. And that was like the only like kind of like incident. And what happened afterwards is we did like external audits, and ever since we've been like secure code reviewing every line of code, what our devs produce, but then also all the underlying libraries we use. A lot of people tell us it's crazy, it's like ridiculous, but we say no. That makes us, always gives us full confidence. We know we read the code, we know there is no, malicious bits inside. And whenever there's an updated one of these libraries, we check the difference and we read that code as well. Whatever was changed or added, we read it. And that's what I tell all the projects and all the low-level tech guys within all the other projects is, this is the only way to be sure that it works. You can't trust third parties. Your best devs, you need to do this yourself. And you only get the external security, firm and auditor to confirm your findings or non-findings. We Zens, a lot of projects do this just to say, oh, you know what? We have this audit made or that audit made. It's just about having that stamp. Oh, it was audited, But if you and your best staffs haven't read the code, all your code and the code of the underlying libraries that you utilize, you can't be sure. I mean, obviously, there's things that go beyond the scope, like, the operating system and all the text, layers within there. The scope, you still need to limit the scope a bit. But all third-party libraries and, tech that wasn't coded by you and wasn't coded by Apple or Microsoft or, Linus Torvalds' kernel team neither, that needs to be checked. That needs to be validated, unless it's something that, Vinny or like people that are well known in the space coded and you are absolutely sure. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of lines of code, right? Like operating system. You can't read all of that just to make sure the software you build there is safe. But you can read your code and the code from, third parties that you utilize. That is essential. Otherwise, there's always a risk.
Great. Thanks. Good answer as well. Let's go into gas fees. You've introduced gas fee swaps with Ethereum's account abstraction standard, ERC 4337, using paymasters. So who pays for those transactions, and how do you prevent abuse from spam or Sybil attacks?
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, we look at it and envision various possibilities of funding swap transactions. One key vision we had in mind is, okay, someone is going to swap into an asset where you need that underlying asset to complete a swap, which is paradoxically, an issue because it's the asset you're trying to buy, so you don't have it to pay a fee in that asset. So what you could do is like basically add a small margin on top, charge that as part of the trading fee, and have the gas fee funded by the user himself. Option 2 is, and that's to kickstart things for certain like campaigns, trading campaigns you want to, provide. You could actually like fund a gas fee pool, which you then use for swaps, for example, or whatever. You can define that in your smart contracts as you wish. It could be for a game, to spawn a player, whatever. You can fund that if you want. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's the end user, but it's much smoother. You don't have to get on a centralized exchange or somewhere to buy some coin or token to use a DeFi app. You can use, mainly what you have right now, and that's, I believe, like a huge enhancement.
Thank you. Talking about the future, what's Komodo's long-term plan for KMZ tokens' role in the ecosystem, and how will it value, how will it capture value across EVM chains and Cosmos flows through fees, maybe token burns, stacking, security? You tell me.
Yes. So the plan that we've presented to the community some time ago was indeed like one big item and factor is burning. So a quarter of all transaction fees and actually of the revenue that we generate with the DEX. So basically the DEX fee revenue stream is being used to buy and burn KMD, and not just buy and burn them, but actually like grab them off the DEX, which will create the constant buy pressure. So key goal for us and for KMD, the token, the asset, the coin, is to render it more and more a deflationary, like tokenomic model. So again, utilizing it as part of the DEX, ecosystem is one of these, but we're looking into like additional routes, right? Like, so one of them is GameFi. That's one thing. We have a sub team looking into this and working on this stack. And yeah, key goal really increasing utility for KMD, the coin itself. And right now, I mean, I believe it's on a historical low, almost pretty much like, compared to all-time highs. So we believe that's also like, a big opportunity for us, for the market, like a reset, if you want to look at it, kind of like detaching itself from the centralized, TradFi stack that kind of like undermined, the core crypto ethos.
Yes, well, and if we look ahead at the role of centralized exchanges and how they might lose importance and new technologies come over, especially artificial intelligence or zero knowledge proofs that you also mentioned, and cross-chains protocols dominate, what role do you think Komodo will play? What are your design choices, or what does Komodo have in play to actually still matter in 5 years from now? Also taking into account that has this technology, burgeoning technology that started actually a few years ago, many years ago, in terms of, the blockchain.
I think the great thing with Komodo is, that all our tech and also the end user product, it's based on KDF, the Komodo DeFi framework. It's a very modular piece of software. This is basically like you can look at it like the peer-to-peer node, the core brain software, right? Like of the DEX, the back end, what runs in the background, what connects to all the other peers within the network. And this framework, really, you can extend and expand this, right? We believe the low level technology and the low level purpose, this interbridging and interconnecting different protocols, is something you can like use for a lot of different use cases. It doesn't have to be just coins or crypto sets and blockchains like we know it now. This could be any type of interface, right? Like that you interconnect and you want to have a cryptographic, trustless, and peer-to-peer based stack for this intercommunication between these different protocols. So what I look at Komodo is like definitely going to evolve, no question, with AI specifically. The changes that we are witnessing and that are still to come, no one can predict it at the point, right? Like it's just gonna be a pile of surprises there. But I definitely see Komodo still being like within like the DeFi space in 5 years from now, and like acting as a core bridge like to this native UTXO swap mechanisms. Again, if you look at all the DEXs out there ain't, there aren't such DEXs that bridge native non-wrapped Komodos to or Bitcoin or Doge or any of these UTXO protocols to all these other like protocols. So that's, I think, our strength. That's our unique value proposition. That's what we're gonna like keep the focus on, definitely.
Well, we'll see. Hopefully it will be like that in 5 years
I
from
hope
now.
to.
Yes. Thank you for joining us today, Kadan. That was
Thank
Kadan
you. Thanks for your
Stadelmann.
time.
Thank you. It was a really, really interesting, good conversation. And we're hoping to see more of it and how you compare to new privacy-oriented projects that might come up,
Absolutely.
in the name
Anytime.
of
Sure.
the
I'd love
ethos
to.
of blockchain. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Kadan.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you,
Have a
and
nice
see you
one. Thank
soon.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. I'm
Bye-bye.
Lorena
Thank
Nessi for
you.
CCN, and that's Kadan
Thanks.
Stadelmann. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.